you play the game with a sense of freedom and joy that I don't see in too many other people. So,
well, yeah, I'm just trying to have fun mostly. I mean, I don't really take the game too seriously and just kind of do whatever feels right at the moment, I guess.
Welcome to Dorks Being Dorks, a Brewster Baseball Association podcast where we talk about out-of-the-park baseball and how it works within the BBA. I'm Ron Collins, General Manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and today I've got Alan Ehlers with us, who is the General Manager of Brooklyn. I am so excited to have Alan here. We're going to talk about roster construction and some of the really cool and inventive things that Alan does. So thanks for your time here today, Alan. I definitely appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to finally be on one of these podcasts.
Well, you know, we've raised your profile now up far enough that when things crash and burn, you know, your fans will be even more upset. So anyway, let's kind of jump right into it. Let's talk about roster construction, the way that you look at building your teams. What are your? Let me just give you a free-form moment to talk about your team a little bit and what your thoughts are about roster construction, and then I will pinpoint you down into some more detailed questions.
Okay. What I basically look for in building a roster is trying to use not only the 27-man roster, but the 40-man roster to my advantage and trying to get them all to work cohesive, like toward the same goal. So in that you have your superstars, but you can't always have superstars. So at other positions, you got platoon players, and with your pitching staff, you kind of want different styles of pitchers that can match up against certain teams, and just generally stuff like that, trying to mix and match to create the best matchups.
When you separate out your players, stars and platoon players and various role players, what are your thoughts as you go about doing that? I mean, if I were to sit down and start trying to operate like you, what would the first set of things that you would do looking at a roster?
I generally try to bring in as many versatile players as I can, like as far as hitters that can play a lot of different positions, or pitchers who could start or pitch out of the bullpen. That'll give you the flexibility so that when you do add other players, they could be whatever position, and you can just kind of work around that. And then once you have the base of the team set, that's when you kind of go position by position and say, I can have this guy play here, but he's left-handed and can't really hit left-handed pitching, so I need to get a platoon partner for him, and just kind of fill in the gaps that way.
When you're looking for a platoon player, or when you're looking for a matched set of players, is it as simple for you as digging down and looking at splits, or do you have alternate things that you're looking at?
Well, when I originally started, I mostly looked for splits, like lefties versus righties. That's the obvious thing. Last season, I did something that was kind of interesting. Was I had at my DH position, I had a lefty who was really good at contact and not striking out. And then I had a right-handed batter who was really good at hitting home runs and drawing walks. So it really made a robust platoon where it wasn't always lefty versus lefty and righty versus righty. It would go depending on who was pitching that day. If there was a pitcher who had poor control, whether they were righty or lefty, I would play Ricardo Guzman, who was the DH who could draw a lot of walks and hit home runs. And then if it was a pitcher who had low stuff, I would play Valentin, who was very good at hitting singles.
That's something that I just thought, it blew my mind when I heard you talking about that on the forums, right? How do you attempt to do that in a league that plays 7 days at a time, right? Are you constantly using 7-day lineups? Or what happens if you're playing Yellow Springs, what happens if I shift my rotation against Brooklyn?
Well, to answer the first question, yes, I would need to. I pretty much go through the 7-day lineups every sim, and I'll look at the opposing pitcher that day and try to figure out what players I have on my team that'll have the best chance of succeeding. A lot of it is luck too. I mean, if you could change your pitchers, then you're going to have an advantage over me. And that's actually kind of what led me to the pitching part of it, when I've been like not setting a starter. I've been changing my starters all the time. It's kind of to combat other teams from, setting their lineups against my pitchers.
So as when you're talking about your methodology of using pitchers, give me a 30 seconds or a minute on what you mean by that.
When using my pitchers or
right.
the other teams?
First off, using your pitchers, and then we'll get into how to deal with playing against you, right?
Okay.
We'll use your secrets against you.
Yeah, I got to keep some things secret. But I guess when selecting my pitchers, like for years now, I've been using a thing called like the pitching platoon, where I'd keep a bunch of starters on my team who might not be the greatest starters in the world, but they all had like unique skill sets. Like some would be, strikeout pitchers, others would be good at avoiding home runs. And then because the Brewster has such like vivid personalities and GMs across the league, like they kind of have extreme teams that will play one way or another, or their park. So like if I play a team that has a small ballpark and yields a lot of home runs, I'm going to want to pitch a pitcher that has like better movement. And then if I play a team that like strikes out a lot, maybe I'll put a pitcher that has a greater stuff that day.
So fundamentally, what I just kind of heard you say is that maybe there's a push-pull here, right? As you're going through and selecting players for your team. If a player has a hole, it doesn't maybe bother you as much as it might bother some other general managers. You're looking for a strength that you're going to be able to pit against a team that has that strength and or weakness.
Yeah, that's correct. It's kind of like a balance, a player could have a deficiency, but if the team they're playing has like a deficiency in that area too, it's like it might not be as noticeable. Like a pitcher with poor control, if they play a team that doesn't walk a lot, then that's not really going to be as big of an issue as it would be as if they played a team that does walk a lot.
Yeah, I think that is actually one of the most interesting aspects of the league. You mentioned some very strong personalities. The first one that always jumps to my mind is Huntsville and Kyle with his very strong left-handed frame of reference. In my division right now, Omaha has a extremely interesting matchup of skills versus ballpark because they play in a very tiny ballpark, so power is a big deal. Boise looked like they were going to be focused in that direction, but now with the GM shifts, we'll see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Huntsville because my first season in the Brewster, I played Huntsville in the playoffs, and it was like I was definitely the underdog in that series, and I kind of looked through and I had a bunch of left-handed pitchers, and Kyle always has like all the left-handed hitters, and I was able to ride that and actually get past them in like a huge upset in that series. And that's kind of where like a lot of these ideas came from, was that, and looking around at other teams maybe not to the same extent, but did the same thing where they kept a lot of the same types of players on their team, so I could kind of work the matchups a little better.
Alrighty, so let's go back a little bit to the question of dealing with when pitchers change, right, against you, or when things don't work out for your you have a high churn of players coming up and down your organization, right? You're talking about the 40-man roster from AAA up into the majors. My frame of reference is that you use your minor leagues more and more creatively than most other general managers in the league. Do these two ideas kind of go together?
Yeah. I guess there's two ways that you could build a team. You could build a team that's like really top heavy and has like a lot of stars. I tend to not do that and just get like the best 40 players that I can and just kind of try to work the matchups that way. So I definitely do, like going into the season, I look at my whole 40-man roster and I want like some kind of purpose out of all 40 of those guys where they can help me win at some point, rather than just storing them in case somebody gets injured. Actually,
that's an interesting break, right? Because a lot of people look at, and I tend to actually, my initial frame of reference around AAA is these are the guys who are going to be my injury relief valves. But I will say that as a general rule, I often have 2 or 3 players rather than the full set of 40 mana. I usually have 2 or 3 players that I expect I'm going to swap up and down, generally for like defensive purposes. Or occasionally I'll have people that I want to swap up and down for purposes of service time and Super 2 management. Does service time and Super 2 management come into your frame of reference at all? Or are you just purely looking at matchups?
Generally, with the Super 2, not with these types of players, because these types of players aren't really superstars anyway. Like which I haven't had in a really long time, but I haven't had a really great prospect come up through my system. If I had one of those, maybe I'd be more concerned about Super 2s, but these are mostly just platoon players who might help out for like 4 or 5 years, and then, they ride off into the sunset. Mm-hmm. So as far as Super 2s, that's not really a big issue for me.
So let's talk about the process of managing that whole 40-man roster throughout the time of a year. When you have your 40-man roster, does it tend to be stable through a season, or are you swapping people in and out of the 40-man roster? Are you using waivers a lot and so forth? So effectively, are you using like 60 people?
At times, yes. There's something that I picked up, I guess it was about 2 seasons ago, when I traded for Juan Hernandez. I mean, I didn't really want Juan Hernandez, but I felt like I got a good enough value where I could take his salary and then it wouldn't, it wasn't going to kill me and I'd get some good prospects back. But what happened was I'd put him on waivers and then I'd realize that nobody was going to claim him. So I had this player that was like kind of decent, and he also fit my pitching platoon system because he was a good pitcher, but he just gave up a lot of home runs. So if I played him in bigger ballparks, he would do good. And he actually made the All-Star team last year. And, through half the season, I kept bouncing him back and forth through the waiver wire because I knew nobody was going to claim him. So in that sense, I did open up a couple more roster spots. It's almost like a veteran option where, you don't have to worry about anybody claiming them.
I hadn't thought about it that way. But the whole idea of you've got a relatively high-paid veteran that you don't have to worry about their whole 40-man slot before it's all said and done. So it's always something new to learn here before it's all said and done. So that's
why I partially don't care as much about like higher contracts as much as other people would because of that same reason. I mean, it does hurt your salary cap, but if you have the room anyway, then there's really no point in not getting, a high-priced player or whatever if it can net you some other things.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've done my research properly. What is your budget and salary cap situation right now? I think you're getting close to the cap with all the players you brought in here on your last big push.
I'm close to the cap, and I'm also on record as saying I'm kind of destroying my team right now because I want to do like a big rebuild. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually losing like a ton of money this year, and like I'm going to be in debt for like probably the next 5 seasons. But I was afraid to say it. I knew I had to say something eventually because I don't want people to think that I'm going to destroy the team and then leave the league. But right now, I just released Juan Hernandez, as we were just talking about him. And like I've released a lot of players to get under the cap to kind of try to win these past few years. So it's kind of a strategy, and I don't recommend the strategy, but for what I want to do, I want to take over a bad team, but I don't want to change teams. So
you have to create one on the fly.
Yeah. So I'm doing a lot of things right now that I wouldn't recommend. I mean, and financially I've been by my own will, like, just terribly run the last like 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think every team has a natural ebb and flow when it comes to their runs. Clearly, I am attempting to continue to keep Yellow Springs at the 95 win every year point of view, right? That's my personal challenge. And I think it is possible to accomplish that, but it takes both a bit of skill and a pretty good dose of luck in certain places. So I have no aspersions to no false notions that my 95 wins forever will actually occur. When it comes to a certain point, though, I think you do have to kind of make a decision as to whether you're going to how you're going to focus on building your roster over the years. And that actually opens up a question in that sense, because I know you've been doing a lot of these creative things and you've been posting a series of fantastic articles about the ultimate rebuild. How long have you been planning this transition from perpetual upper tier team to the teardown candidate?
Well, I would say probably about the 2033, 2034 seasons. I'd gone through a rebuild before because I took over the team in 2026 and we won the Landis that year. And then the next season we had the best record in the Johnson League, but I was taking over a team that somebody else built and I couldn't really do it. So I had to rebuild in the late 2020s. And then, in the early 2030s, I kind of felt that it wasn't really going as well as I had planned. And I didn't really feel like I set the financial footings in place. So I just didn't feel like this run was really going to be great. So I decided I just wanted to do something that I've never done in an outside the park league. And that's actually do a disciplined rebuild where I try to make a really good team, kind of like yours has been for the last 10 years, that you can be good for a sustained run.
Okay, so given your propensity to look at things from a more creative point of view, talk to me about what you're thinking when you look at building your roster over the next 5 years, going through drafts and so forth. Are you looking for kind of best available athlete? Do you have a frame of reference as to what you want to build, and how are you going to go about doing that?
I'm still kind of developing the final product of how I want to do it. For probably 4 or 5 years at least, I'm going to be I'm not going to tank or anything like that, but I'm going to be toward the bottom of the division. So I'm going to be bringing in a lot of popular players, trying to get out of debt and stuff like that. So I actually plan on holding a fire sale, which will get rid of my initial roster. And then I'll probably even do a secondary wave of trades because I want to create a really deep farm system that hasn't been seen before. Something where I got made BBA prospects at every level, ready to come up when all is said and done. And that's going to take years to do. But as far as the final product, I'm kind of still kicking around ideas on how I want to build the team. I do think I'm going to use some of the ideas, maybe the Cyclone that I'm using now. I might actually continue to do something like that into this whole project.
Yeah, I love the whole concept of the Cyclone. It will be interesting to see what Out of the Park, the game itself, does in response to some of the more advanced, I'll call it advanced modern usage of the bullpen and usage of pitchers and openers and things like that. If the game allows for even more depth of use of pitchers, that will be interesting to see how you particularly use that.
I did read a thread on the main boards, and they are going to use the opener next year. That's been confirmed that's going to be a part of the game next year. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so the proof is always in the pudding when it comes to Out of the Park and Out of the Park features. I have a general rule of thumb that says the first year that Marcus releases something, it doesn't really work the way that it was envisioned. And then the second year it works better. And then by the third year, it's a pretty robust feature.
Yeah.
But that's only a rule of thumb. They've got some pretty good data, I think, now on how the major leagues actually used pitchers. So they're not making it up from scratch, so maybe that will put them ahead of the curve a little bit. That'll be exciting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely exciting.
Well, that kind of runs me through all of the main questions I had on roster construction. Did you have any other things that you wanted to add or to get into?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything.
Well, that's fantastic. And so I appreciate your time here today. We'll see if maybe we can twist your arm and get you to join us for a couple other topics. That would be really exciting.
Oh, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissionered by Mr. America himself, Matt Rechtenwald, and competed in by an amazing group of outstanding general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. You have been listening to Dorks Being Dorks, a podcast where we put BBA GMs together to talk about Out of the Park and how it works in the BBA. Music is Some of My Fears by Daisy May and is used under a Creative Commons Attribution license.
I have lost everything. Just like the Bucks are dead on the range. is twisted, the stars that not shine. Creation threatening, the worry is mine. The king was singing, and now he's dead. John wanted peace, and it's war instead.